all of the hostages, but especially our 8 American families who have loved ones in Gaza. We are determined to bring them home. The proposal that President Biden put forward is the best way to do that. I met with Prime Minister Netanyahu last night, and he reaffirmed his commitment to the proposal. Everyone's vote is in, except for one vote, and that's Hamas. And that's what we wait for.
So here's the latest. International pressure growing on Israel and Hamas after the UN Security Council unanimously passed a 3-phase US-backed ceasefire plan for the Gaza Strip. The plan calling for the release of all hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners in Israel, the return of displaced Gazans and the withdrawal of IDF troops from Gaza. Joining us now to discuss is Aaron David Miller of the Carnegie Institute for Peace. Aaron, in some ways, Secretary Blinken makes it sound quite straightforward. We wait for one vote, that's Hamas, and that's the vote we wait for. How do you see things?
You know, traditionally, Middle East negotiations have only 2 speeds, slow and slower. And this is not a normal traditional negotiation. The principal Palestinian decision maker is ensconced in a tunnel somewhere below Khan Yunis or Rafah, or maybe even in a tunnel in Egypt across the border. And you have indirect negotiations going on with the Qataris and the Egyptians, each with their own motives. And then, of course, you have Israeli politics. So I think the sequence is clear, but we'll see where it goes. Hamas is either going to produce a clean yes, unlikely, a yes, but that's reasonable, that may force the Israelis and the Americans to do additional negotiation, or a no. And a no, of course, would make it much easier for the Prime Minister of Israel, who I think really is not interested in a complete implementation of the president's proposal, to basically continue to maneuver, buy time, and watch this thing play out.
Aaron, to that point, let's say the answer is yes. Do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu would go through with it?
I mean, he's going to have to present, if it's a clean yes, and it's hard to believe in any negotiation, a clean yes, but let's say assuming Hamas says yes, then it's going to have to, it's already been endorsed by the War Cabinet, which may or may not exist now since Benny Gantz has left. It'll go to the full Israeli government, and the 2 most extremist parties basically have said, we will not accept any part of this proposal. So if, in fact, it's presented to the government and they say no, then there are 2 possibilities. Either Yair Lapid, who's already publicly said he would give Netanyahu a safety net to go forward, and you'd have a sort of disunity government for the next several months, or alternatively, the government falls, presumably, and you'd end up with new elections in 3 months.
On a broader level, Aaron, you've been covering the Middle East for decades. You've been watching events transpire. It strikes me that this is a particularly intractable situation, and one that has sort of changed the social fiber and the political dynamic in ways that we really haven't seen before. How do you understand how the conversation has changed, not in terms of in the Middle East, but also in the United States around this issue?
Look, I think you've got a situation in decades of working the State Department and following this issue, never have I seen any Middle Eastern issue provoke the kind of controversy and domestic turmoil that this one has. And I think in an election, which could be contested by 3 states and under 100,000 votes, any impact, any event, including Gaza, the uncommitted, those who won't vote for the current president or won't vote at all, could have an impact. I think the domestic climate here politically is also very fraught. You have a Republican Party that has emerged as the Israel Can Do No Wrong party, and you have a Democratic Party that's deeply divided on what kind of Israel mainstream Democrats and progressive Democrats are prepared to support. And against the backdrop of all of this, of course, you have the Prime Minister of Israel, highly controversial, due to address a joint session on July 24, besting Churchill's record of 3 addresses to a joint meeting or a joint session of Congress. So it's become a political issue, a fraught one in a way I think it's never never had this sort of impact before.
Aaron, there's been a lot of focus, certainly on a number of big companies, on the role that a lot of universities have had in this. We don't have a lot of time, but in a minute, can you give us a sense of whether you continue to expect universities to sort of produce some of the protests that we've seen recently?
I mean, it's really hard to know. These protests came out in May, toward the end of semesters. Will they have the sort of impact in residents again in September? It's really tough to say. But again, I think you've got a situation where the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has basically created an opening for any number of laments, complaints, and ideologies. And I think that's, frankly, quite dangerous, because the way this conflict is not a morality play between the forces of goodness on one end and the forces of darkness on the other. It's a very complicated conflict in which both sides have competing needs and requirements that need to be met. It's really Goethe's definition of a tragedy, I think. Two competing justices. I only wish that the political dialogue in the United States could reflect that sort of pragmatism and balance, because maybe we could create the kind of political consensus that would help, at least on our side, resolve this rather than exacerbate it.